Marin Calloway laid her last silver dollar on the felt and swallowed. Across the table, Silas North's smile cut thin as a knife, all charm gone. If she lost this hand, the school roof would keep leaking over her students' heads. If she won, she could finally tell the school board to stop using the word luxury about chalk and dry books. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The saloon's lamps burned low, turning the green cloth between them into a small island under glass. Men's voices rolled around her cattle prices, winter feed, who'd been knifed outside the freight office last week. But all of that was a blur behind the steady rasp of cards being squared in the dealer's hands. "Last dollar, Miss Calloway?" Silas asked softly. "Didn't take you for a gambler." He said it with the same lazy drawl he used in the schoolyard, when he leaned on the rail to watch the children at recess and pretend he wasn't accounting which fathers owed him money. Marin kept her gaze on the silver coin. It had a nick in the edge where her father's belt buckle had caught it once. Years ago, when he de-fisted his hands and sworn he'd never step into a card room again. He'd lost that vow, and this coin with it, more than once. She'd won it back on a train heading west, trading grammar lessons and a sharp eye for drunks. It was the last thing she owned that had ever belonged to him. That hurt more than the thought of another month mopping rainwater from the schoolroom floor. "I'm not a gambler," she said. "I'm a teacher who needs a roof." Silas's pale eyes crinkled. The gold pin in his tie small horseshoe, 2 diamonds, caught the lamplight when he leaned in. "And do you think the house cares which you are?" He tapped the table with one long finger. "Silver's silver, darling. Call or fold." He did not say you can't afford to fold, but the whole room heard it anyway. Marin could feel them watching her. Ranch hands in sweat-stained shirts, the blacksmith with his ruined fingers curled around a glass, the deputy nursing coffee in the corner. She could feel the weight of their curiosity. What would the new schoolmarm do now that she'd come up against Silas North, who never lost a hand he meant to win? Beyond them, at the far end of the bar, Rowan Creed watched her and didn't move at all. He was leaned back against the wall, one boot hooked over the lower rail, broad shoulders turned slightly away from the room, as if all of this were none of his concern. The lamplight picked out the line of his jaw, the dark stubble there, the scar that curved from his ear to the corner of his mouth, like someone had once tried to carve a smile into his face. In a year of teaching in Abbott's Ford, Marin had never heard Rowan Creed waste a sentence. To most people he offered only nods and the occasional tilt of his hat. To the children he offered fresh-cut cedar blocks for counting, or a quiet hand on a frightened shoulder the day little Tommy Powell's father hadn't to come home from the line camp. He never lingered. He never played. Except tonight, he wore his good coat, and his boots were dusted but clean. On the rail beside him sat a glass of whiskey still more than half full. From where she sat, Marin could read his posture as clearly as she read a boy fidgeting before a lie. Rowan had come to the Dead Lantern Saloon for a reason. "Miss?" the dealer prompted. Marin inhaled once, deep enough to feel it tug against the laces of her corset. She imagined the schoolhouse down the hill, dark now, the sagging roof that creaked when the wind hit it just wrong, the row of faces that filled the benches each morning, brown hands, pale hands, ink-stained fingers eager to hold books no one else wanted them to touch. She imagined the board meeting last week, the way the 3 men in their pressed coats had sat behind the desk like a jury, turning her request over and over until it sounded like a crime. "We just don't have funds for repairs this season," Chairman Lyle had said, folding his hands over his well-fed stomach. Silas North had lounged in the corner then, too, boots crossed, playing with a silver coin. He'd never looked so interested in education until the board had mentioned deficit and debt in the same sentence. "Funds," he'd echoed. "Well now, I might know a way to help, gents." For a price. Marin had walked out before she could hear the terms. She'd known enough of men like him to know the bill always came due in something more than dollars. Now the bill was sitting in front of her, glittering on green felt. She nudged the coin toward the center of the table with her forefinger. The small scrape of metal on felt sounded louder than the piano. "Call," she said. Silas's smile widened, just a fraction. The dealer flicked out fresh cards, quick and clean. 5-card draw, nothing fancy. 3 other players sat at the table, a freighter with dust still in his beard, the town dentist who smelled faintly of whiskey and clove oil, and a tired woman from the boarding house who took in mending, and Marin watched their eyes as the cards slid in front of them. She'd taught herself years ago that reading faces mattered more than reading cards. But cards, at least, didn't lie. Her hand was weak. A pair of 8s, and nothing else to recommend it. "You sure about this?" The mending woman murmured, so soft only Marin could hear. Her own hand shook just a little as she lifted the corner of her card. North doesn't like losing. Marin kept her own cards low. "I don't like children getting soaked doing their sums," she said. "Somebody has to dislike something useful tonight." The woman blinked at that, then gave the smallest huff of a laugh and tossed in 2 more coins. The freighter folded with a grunt, chair scraping. The dentist stayed in, eyes darting between Silas and Marin as if he were watching a dog circle a rabbit. Silas tapped a knuckle on the table. "Teacher's brave," he said. "Bravery doesn't always pay." "No," Marin said, surprising herself with how level her voice sounded. "Sometimes it takes payment and walks away." A few men chuckled. Silas's gaze sharpened. He glanced at the dealer. "Let's see who's buying who, then." Cards were discarded, red backs sliding over green. Fresh cards landed in their place. Marin asked for 2. When she turned them over, her heart gave an unhelpful leap. Another 8. 3 of a kind wasn't enough to make any real man choke, but it was better than she'd hoped. She could feel sweat at the small of her back, but her hands were steady when she set her cards down. "That's to you," the dealer said. Marin glanced at the small stack of coins in front of her. $2.40. Not much against the tall stack in front of Silas, but she'd seen more than one arrogant fool trip over his own pile. She pushed $1 in, half her stack. Silas barely looked at his cards. He seemed to be watching her instead, eyes going from her hands to her face, a slow inventory. "How long you been in Abbott's Ford now?" he asked. "Since spring," she said. "And in all that time, anybody ever teach you the house wins?" He slid $3 in, like he was dropping crumbs to birds. The dentist folded, mumbling something about an early drill. The mending woman bit her lip, glanced at Marin, then folded too, gathering her few coins back to the safety of her apron. It left the table quiet. Just Marin, Silas, the dealer, and the hum of the room pulling back like a tide. "Raise," Silas said lazily. Another $1. Marin looked at her remaining coins, looked at her 3 8s, looked at her life laid out in stakes she hadn't agreed to. If she backed down now, she could keep $1.40. Enough for maybe a stack of readers, if she bargained and didn't mind them secondhand. Enough to say she hadn't risked everything. But she knew the leaks in the roof, like she knew the freckles on a child's face. She knew where the raindrops would fall when the clouds came, knew which desk Tommy would share with Harriet to save their workbooks from the wet. She put her hand flat against the rotten beam and felt how close they were to real disaster. $1.40 would not change that. She thought of the board again, of Chairman Lyle's pinched face and the way he glanced at Silas as if the gambler were the one grading Marin as papers. She thought, "I am so tired of men who own nothing of a thing deciding if it matters." Her fingers found the edge of the last coin. She pushed it in. "Call," she said again. The dealer nodded once, as if they'd just concluded a business deal instead of a small collision with fate. "Gentlemen," he said, out of habit, then corrected himself with a quick apologetic glance at Marin. Ah, players. Show em. Silas North spread his cards with theatrical grace. 2 kings, 2 tens, can astray 3. Full house, reliable, solid as his reputation. Marin laid hers down in a neat fan. 3 eights, she said. There was a pause where she felt the whole room inhale. Then the dealer cleared his throat. House takes it, he said. Full house over 3 of a kind. Relief rolled through the crowd. A few murmurs. Someone clapped Silas on the shoulder. The scrape and clink of glasses resumed. The world spun on. Inside Marin's chest, something stopped. She heard the dealer rake her coins away. Heard the silver dollar, her father's dollar slide into the hungry maw of the house. The sound was small, but it landed like a shovel of earth on a grave. Silas's smile came back full force now, charming and bright. Unlucky, Miss Calloway, he said. But look at it this way. Children learn from disappointment, too. Marin stared at the empty space where her coin had been. If disappointment taught half as well as a dry reader, she said, this town would be full of geniuses. A few men laughed again, but softer. There was something under her voice now that made their amusement uneasier. Silas tugged his cuff straight. Now, he said. No shame in knowing when you're beat. He meant more than cards. He always did. Marin pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping. Her knees felt wobbly for exactly 2 seconds. Then she locked them and lifted her chin. She would find another way. She always had. Pleasure, gentlemen, she said to the table, out of habit more than anything, then turned away. As she moved through the haze of cigar smoke and lamplight, men shifted instinctively, parting around her like water. She caught glimpses. The pianoman's fingers finding some old hymn, played slow enough to be a lament. The mending woman counting coins with a frown. The freighter lighting a cigarette with hands that shook more than his face. No one stopped her. At the bar, Ida poured a glass before Marin even opened her mouth. Water, the older woman said, sliding it over. On the house. You're already down a day's pay, Marin. Marin wrapped her fingers around the cool glass. 2 weeks, she corrected quietly. Roof estimate. Ida's mouth flattened. Should have made those bored men play instead of you, she muttered. Ridiculous. A teacher gambling for her own classroom. Marin drank. The water tasted faintly of iron and dust. It cleared the smoke from her throat, but did nothing for the tightness in her chest. Silas offered to help, she said. After the meeting, Ida snorted. Silas only offers to help like a coyote offers to clean up chickens, she said. What did he say? That he had influence, Marin said, with the board. That he could get them to reconsider the roof if I was willing to be flexible. Ida's eyes flashed. Flexible how? Marin stared into her water. How men usually mean it, she said at last. Even if they don't say it plain. Ida muttered something sharp and unprintable under her breath. You told him no. Of course I told him no, Marin said. I've had enough of being currency. The words sat there between them, heavier than the glass. When Marin had first arrived in Abbott's Ford dust on her boots, and her father's coin tucked deep in her pocket, Dee promised herself 3 things. She would build a schoolroom where every child could walk in without shame. She would not apologize for wanting more than marriage to a man who liked her quiet and small. And she would never again stand by while someone else gambled with her life. Now here she was, in a saloon, having done exactly that. North's been sniffing around the Creed place, Ida said suddenly, changing the subject with the grace of someone who'd soothed many bruised prides over the years. You notice? Marin blinked. She had noticed in small ways. The way Silas always seemed to be on the same side of the street as Rowan when the rancher rode in for supplies. The way Silas had asked casual questions about the Creed herd count while pretending to admire the new hitching post. Rowan always answered with one word if he answered at all. Mostly he tipped his hat and moved on. Rowan Creed doesn't seem like a man who needs a gambler's attention, Marin said. Ida shrugged one shoulder. Big ranch, she said. Big land, big debts sometimes. His father took on a lot, keeping their men fed through the last drought. I hear some of those markers ended up in Silas North's pocket when the bank got squeamish. Marin's stomach tightened. So Rowan owes him? Maybe not yet. Ida wiped a glass. Maybe soon. Men like Silas bet on soon. Marin glanced down the bar. Rowan's glass sat untouched on the rail. His eyes were on the faro table now, where Silas had drifted to lean on a chair and murmur something to one of the ranch hands. The set of Rowan's shoulders hadn't changed, but there was a stillness to him that Marin recognized. She'd seen it in boys right before a fight, in girls right before they decided to answer back. I should go home, Marin murmured. And walk that hill alone with half this town full of whiskey? Ida snorted. You'll finish your water and let someone decent walk with you. Or I'll sleep upstairs and explain to your students tomorrow that even teachers can beat the house. Marin almost smiled. Generous choices. It's a generous town when it remembers how, Ida said. Before Marin could answer, there was a shift in the noise behind them, like a wind changing direction. Conversation dipped, then rose in a different key. Ida's head tilted slightly. What now? She muttered. Marin turned. The faro table had emptied except for two men. Silas North, sleeves rolled, tie loosened, eyes bright with the sharp shine of a man who'd been winning just enough to feel invincible. And Rowan Creed, standing opposite him, one hand resting on the back of an empty chair, had sat on the table like he'd laid down a piece of himself. Between them, the dealer looked like he'd have preferred a stick of dynamite on his table to the tension sitting there now. Here it comes, Ida murmured. I was wondering which night it'd be. Marin slid off the stool before she'd fully decided to move. Her feet carried her toward the table, drawn by something in Rowan's stillness and Silas's coiled energy. A small crowd was already forming. Men who would never be invited to a bank meeting or a board vote, but who understood stakes all the same. Mr. North. Rowan's voice carried, low and steady, through the clatter. Marin had heard him speak in class once, when he'd come to the door with a new box of chalk and a shy boy half hidden behind him. Ma'am, he'd said then, tipping his hat. This is Eli. He can ride anything with 4 legs, but hasn't been taught his letters. I aim to fix that. Today his tone was different. Not harder, just heavier. You've been sending men out to my north line with paper instead of fence posts, Rowan said. Thought we might settle that debt like men, not clerks. Silas spread his hands. Rowan, he said, using the first name like they were old friends. You know me. I'm a reasonable man. The bank sells me your note. I'm just doing my civic duty, making sure it gets paid. Civic duty, Ida hissed under her breath. Listen to him. Marin edged closer. The men near the table shifted, giving her just enough space. Some of them nodded, small respectful dips of chin. Teacher, town conscience, watching mattered. You move the note's due date up, Rowan said. My men say you told them if we couldn't cover it by winter, you'd start carving up the range. Silas chuckled. Ranch that big? He said. Think of all the families that could feed their cattle on that land instead of just Creed stock. Why should one man hold all that? Rowan's gaze didn't flicker. Because my father broke his back holding it, he said. Because my mother died on it. Because every fence post out there has sweat in it that isn't yours. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Men respected that kind of claim, even if they owed Silas money too. Silas sighed theatrically. I did try to do this proper, he said. Offered you terms? Extended schedules. You Creed men, though. Stubborn as the devil's own mules. Rowan's jaw worked once. You offered to cut the herd and take my north pasture for yourself, he said. You offered to sell off the water rights, piece by piece, until we were debt-free and land poor. Silas shrugged, as if he'd suggested a change in curtain fabric. A man in your position can't afford to be sentimental, he said. This territory's growing. Rail lines coming, town swelling. You could stand to think like a businessman instead of a cowboy. Rowan's gaze slid, just for a heartbeat, past Silas, to Marin. It was only a flicker of eye contact, but she felt it like a rope thrown over a drop. She saw the question there, the same one she asked herself in quieter moments. What are you willing to trade to keep what matters? He's not a businessman, someone muttered behind her. He's a creed. Silas leaned on the back of his chair. Tell you what, he said, no need for all this tension. We're civilized men. Let's play a hand. One game, friendly stakes. Ida made a sound like a cat faced with a rattle. Rowan didn't look away from Silas. Friendly stakes? He repeated. Sure. Silas's smile sharpened. You win. We tear up that little note I got from the bank. Every last piece. Your land, your water, all yours, clean. A low murmur went up. And if you win? Rowan asked. Silas's gaze slid over the crowd. If I win? He tapped his chin with one finger, pretending to think. I get half your north range? No, Ida whispered. That's not friendly, someone else said. Marin felt her heartbeat in her throat. She'd seen enough men bet away things they loved because pride pinned them in place. Rowan's face didn't change. And my men? He asked. Silas blinked. What about them? They work that range, Rowan said. They've got families. They get to keep their jobs, even if I lose? Silas laughed. Sure, he said. I'm not a monster. Cows'll still need herding. They can punch my cattle as easy as they punch yours. Marin's belly twisted. There it was again, that easy assumption that men were just pieces on his board. That land and water and work and lives were cards he could shuffle. You don't have to do this, Marin said, before she realized she'd spoken aloud. Heads turned. Silas's brows shot up. Well now, he said. The lady teacher has opinions. Rowan looked at her fully then, his eyes dark under his hat brim. Up close, she could see the lines around them, carved by sun and squinting, not laughter. His shirt was worn at the cuffs, mended with small, neat stitches. His hands resting easy on the chair back were scarred and strong. I do, Marin said, and her voice didn't shake. Cards don't cancel crooked paper. Banks will still find a way to chew on you. Silas clucked his tongue. Miss Calloway, he said, you wound me. Have I ever done anything but offer help in this town? Yes, she said. You've offered help and then charged interest on the gratitude. The crowd hissed softly. A few eyes darted toward the door, as if expecting the sheriff to step in and tell the schoolteacher to mind her tongue. Silas's gaze cooled. You're still angry about the roof, he said. I told you I'd talk to the board for you. I told you I'd make sure this town's children stayed nice and dry. All I asked was a little flexibility with your time. A dinner here, a card game there. A woman in your position alone, in need of friends, shouldn't be turning down such offers. Rowan's jaw flexed. His fingers tightened imperceptibly on the chair. Marin felt heat rise in her cheeks, but not from shame. You offered to buy my silence, she said, and my evenings, and my respect. Those aren't for sale. Silas smiled, slow and poisonous. Everything's for sale eventually, he said. Which reminds me. He straightened, turning his attention back to Rowan. You're right, Creed, he said. Half your north range isn't exactly friendly. Let's sweeten the pot. Make this interesting. The hair on the back of Marin's neck rose. Interesting how? Rowan asked. Silas's eyes slid to her again. A schoolteacher, he said lightly. The words dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Marin felt every gaze swing to her. "What about me?" she asked, though she already knew she wouldn't like the answer. Silas spread his hands as if the idea had just occurred to him, as if he hadn't been walking toward it all night. "You're on a 1-year contract, aren't you, Miss Calloway?" he said. "Board has to renew you come spring. Lot of ways that vote could go." Marin folded her arms to keep from clutching her skirt. "Yes," she said, "and I happen to have influence with the board," Silas went on. "They trust my judgment. They like to say no one knows this town's needs, like a man who travels its every corner. They mean he plays cards in every kitchen," Ida muttered. Silas ignored her. "So here's my proposal," he said. "We play one game, one hand. If I win, I get half your North Range, Creed. You keep your men, your house, your name on the gate. Just share a little." Rowan's eyes didn't leave Silas's face. "And the teacher?" he asked quietly. "If I win," Silas said, "I get the deciding say on whether she stays or goes. Whether the board renews her or finds someone more agreeable." Marin's breath caught. "That's not yours to bet," she said. Silas flicked a glance at her. "Isn't it?" he asked. "The board listens to me. I control the note on Creed land. I keep half this town afloat. Influence is a kind of ownership. Men trade on it every day." He turned back to Rowan. "You win, though," he said. "You get the opposite. You get my say. My vote on that board is yours. You get to decide if she stays, or if the town finds a nice married lady to teach the little ones instead. Might be fun, having that kind of power." The room went so quiet, Marin could hear the creak of the lamps. She wanted to reach across the table and slap the smugness from his face. She wanted to walk out and never come back. She wanted to stand on a chair and tell them all that she was not a sack of flour to be weighed and traded. Instead, she made herself breathe. "Mr. North," she said, "you are not betting me. You are not betting my job, my life, my students." Silas smiled, all teeth. "I'm betting a vote," he said, "a scrap of paper. Men change hands on paper every day, darling. Ask any rancher." His gaze flickered to Rowan again on the last word. Marin turned to Rowan. "Don't do this," she said. "My work is not a stake in some boy's game." Rowan's eyes met hers. They were not soft. They were not hard. They were deep, like a well that had seen drought and flood and still held something at the bottom. "Your work matters," he said. "Yes," she said tightly. And that's why, Silas cut in smoothly, "it belongs at the same table as land and water and debt. Big things, Miss Calloway. Important things. You should be flattered." Marin wanted to scream. "Walk away," she said to Rowan, ignoring Silas now, as if he were a buzzing fly. "You still have choices if you do. You play his game. You teach him what he can get away with." Rowan studied her face for a long breath. The scar at his mouth pulled slightly, as if someone inside had tugged a thread. Then he looked at the dealer. "Deal the cards," he said. Marin's stomach dropped. "Rowan," she whispered. He took his hat off the table and set it on the empty chair, then sat down himself. The chair creaked under his weight. His hands folded once on the table, big and capable, before he reached for the cards. "I won't let him use you up for cheap, Miss Calloway," he said quietly. "Not if there's a way to stop it." She looked at him, at the earnestness in those few words, at the determination under the calm. "And if you lose?" she asked. He did not look away when he answered. "Then I'll have done what I could," he said. "And I'll spend what is left of myself making sure he regrets every inch he thinks he owns." The dealer cleared his throat, clearly wishing he were somewhere else. "Gentlemen," he began automatically, then caught himself again. Players? Stakes agreed?" "No," Marin said. "Yes," Silas said at the same time. Rowan nodded once. "Agreed," he said. Marin felt something inside her harden, like clay in a kiln. "Then I'm sitting in," she said. Heads snapped toward her. Silas laughed. "Oh, now this I have to hear," he said. "You want to make it three-handed, Miss Calloway? I thought you said you weren't a gambler." "I'm not," she said. "I'm a teacher who just learned exactly how little that matters to men like you. So if my life is being put on this table, I'll be the one to touch the cards." The dealer looked panicked. "Ma'am, I don't know as—" "Let her," Rowan said quietly. Silas studied her, eyes narrowing. "What are you going to bet with?" he asked. "You're already tapped out. I saw your last dollar fall." Marin straightened. "My labor," she said. "My time. You seem eager to have those. If you win, you get my evenings for a year. To clean your books, teach your little cousins, whatever respectable work you can say out loud in church. I'll take on extra tutoring to pay Ida for my room when the board underpays me. You get what you wanted access, help, influence, all the things you tried to buy in the dark." Her voice did not waver. "If I win," she went on, "you put in writing that you will never stand in the way of my school again. No whispered words to the board, no quiet threats about budgets. You sign your influence away, to Rowan, to Ida, to anyone but you. And you tear up any note you hold with my name on it, directly or through some bank." The room hummed. Silas stared at her. Then he smiled, slow and delighted. "You really don't know when to fold, do you?" he said. "All right, Miss Calloway. I accept those terms, Rowan?" Rowan nodded once. "Fine," he said. Added to the pot, the dealer looked between them like a man watching a match fall toward a dry barn. "Stakes agreed," he muttered. 5-card draw. One hand only. No discards, no second chances. Everybody sees what they've got all at once. No discards? Silas said, feigning insult. "Where's the fun in that?" "Fun's for Saturday nights," the dealer replied. "This feels more like judgment." He shuffled the cards. The sound was crisp, practiced. Marin watched his hands. Watched the way Silas's gaze followed the deck like a hawk. Watched Rowan's stillness. "Cut," the dealer said, sliding the stack toward Silas. Silas cut with 2 fingers, careless. "Miss," the dealer said, offering the deck to Marin. Marin reached out. Her hand hovered for a heartbeat over the cards. When she'd been a girl, her father had tried to teach her that the trick to cards wasn't luck. It was attention. Most men, he'd said, played the last hand they'd lost, not the one in front of them. She thought of her classroom. Of Tommy stumbling over words and trying again. Of Harriet refusing to let the boys answer every question first. Of Eli Creed sounding out his name like it was a new colt he was learning to trust. She thought of all the ways this town had already bet against its own children. She cut the deck. The dealer dealt. 1 card to Rowan, 1 to Silas, 1 to Marin. Around again. 5 cards each, sliding into place like fate had rails. Marin did not look at hers immediately. She'd learned early that watching other people first told you more than any ink on paper. Silas's fingers curled around his cards. His eyes flicked down, then up. His mouth twitched, tiny, pleased. Rowan's hand stayed resting flat, covering his cards. He didn't move to look. "Go on," Silas said to him. "Afraid of what you'll see?" Rowan's gaze was steady. "A man should know what he's holding before he bets," he said. "But I'm not betting yet." He looked at the dealer. "Pot?" he asked. The dealer cleared his throat. "Pots." "Everything we discussed," he said. "Creedland, North Range. Water rights, note." His eyes ticked to Silas. "Mr. North's vote with the board. Miss Calloway's time and work, and Mr. North's. Say over whether she keeps her job." The words made Marin's skin crawl. "Then I'll open," Silas said. He slid a stack of chips forward. Too many to count at a glance. It didn't matter. The real stakes were invisible. I bet the schoolteacher, he said. The world pinched in. Marin's breath left her. She felt it go, like someone had knocked it from her lungs. The room, the smoke, the dim light, all of it narrowed to Silas's hand on the chips and the smug tilt of his mouth. He said it like he was ordering a drink. Ida cursed softly. She's not a cow, North, someone growled. Silas didn't look away from Rowan. She's a civic asset, he said lightly. A public good. We all have a stake in seeing she's used. Efficiently. He let the words hang. Marin's nails bit into her palms. She would not cry. Not here, not over this man. Rowan's eyes were on Silas. His jaw worked once, twice. Then he slowly lifted his hand from his cards. He didn't look at them. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The dealer looked alarmed. "What's that?" he asked. Rowan set the paper on the table and smoothed it with 2 fingers. "Deed to Creed Ranch," he said quietly. "House, herds, north, south, and east range. Water rights that go with them. Everything I own from the cottonwoods at the creek to the cedar on the ridge." Silas's eyes widened, just for a second, before greed covered the surprise. "Now that," he said, "is a gesture." Rowan finally looked at his cards. His face gave nothing away. "I raise you," he said, voice level. "Everything I own." Silas's smile faltered. The room exhaled in a collective, disbelieving gasp. Marin's heart slammed against her ribs. "Rowan," she breathed. "Don't." He didn't look at her. His eyes were on Silas, and there was something in them now that hadn't been there before. A quiet, earning thing. "Schoolteacher's not a thing you bet, North," he said. "She's a person. You want to put her name in your mouth like that, you'll have to chew past mine." Silas stared at the deed, then at Rowan. "You're insane," he said softly. "Maybe," Rowan said. "Or maybe I'm just done watching you carve pieces off people because you can add." Silas's fingers drummed once on the felt. "Fine," he said at last. "You raise, I see." He pushed his own stack of chips in, as if it were an afterthought next to the paper between them. "All in," he said. The dealer swallowed. "All right then," he said hoarsely. Cards on the table. Everyone show. Marin looked down at her hand. Her fingers felt numb as she lifted the corners. 2 hearts. 3 hearts. 4, 5, 6. A straight flush. Low, but clean. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She forced her hands to move, to lay the cards down in sequence. Silas's gaze snapped to her hand. For the first time that night, his smile disappeared entirely. Slowly, like a man unveiling a magic trick he'd practiced for weeks, he turned over his own cards. 2 queens, 2 jacks, a 9, another full house. The room tilted. Rowan had not yet moved. His cards sat face down in front of him, edges just under his fingers. He stared at the deed on the felt, at Marin's hand, at Silas's. Then, with a slow breath Marin could almost feel in her own lungs, he slid his cards forward. The dealer's hand hovered over them. Every man in the room leaned in. Ida stopped breathing. Marin's throat went dry. "Rowan," she whispered again, without knowing whether it was a plea or a prayer. The dealer flipped the first card. "This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe." Now back to the story. An ace stared up from the felt, black and sharp against the green. The room exhaled in a rough, disbelieving gust. Someone swore softly. Someone else laughed once, a short, startled bark with no humor in it. The dealer's hand hovered, then flipped the second card. Another ace. Marin's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. The breath she'd managed to pull in went thin again. Her own cards lay face down in front of her, edges warm from her grip. Somewhere in the press of bodies, glass clinked against glass and then fell silent. Rowan Creed didn't move. His big hand rested near his cards, as if he simply laid them there, and forgotten them. 3 of a kind, someone muttered. Already beat, North. Silas's face had gone still. The surety in his pale eyes cooled by degrees, like iron losing its glow. The dealer swallowed and turned over the 3rd card. Ace. The saloon went quiet in the way it did the morning after a bad storm, when men stepped outside to see what had been taken from them. 4, the dealer said hoarsely. 4 aces. Rowan looked down at them at last, gaze level, as if he'd known all along. His face stayed unremarkable, but Marin saw the small movement in his throat when he swallowed. 4 of a kind, the dealer went on, voice steadier from habit. Beats a full house. Silas's shoulders twitched. His own card still lay fanned out 2 queens, 2 jacks, a 9 suddenly ordinary. Aces, someone breathed. Man raised his whole ranch on aces. Lord, Ida whispered from somewhere to Marin's left. Rowan Creed, you were ready to lose everything. Rowan's eyes didn't leave the cards. Reckoned there wasn't much point in leaving pieces, he said quietly. Marin's heart thudded against her ribs. 4 aces, full house. The deed to Creed Ranch on the Felt. Silas's influence over her job, her own unseen hand. The dealer's gaze slid sideways to where her 5 cards sat. He cleared his throat. Pot's not called yet. Every eye in the room followed his line of sight. Marin forced her fingers to move. She lifted her cards. 2 of hearts. 3, 4, 5, 6. Not high, not royal. Just a clean, unbroken climb, all red and steady. Her pulse roared in her ears. She laid the cards down in a neat row. Silas snorted. Those are 2s, he said. Barely out the gate. 2 through 6, the dealer said, almost gently. All hearts, straight flush. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The dentist spoke up from the 2nd row of onlookers, voice thin. Straight flush beats 4 of a kind, he said. Low or high. It's the rank that matters. Silas turned on him. Since when are you an authority? Since every card room from here to Dodge told me the same thing, the dentist said, a little stronger now that the words were out. The dealer nodded, as if he just needed someone else to say it first. Royal flush, straight flush, 4 of a kind, he recited. You know that, North? A few men nodded, lips moving along with the order. The dealer's hand came down flat on the table. Pot goes to Miss Calloway, he said. For a second, nobody reacted. The words seemed to fall short of their mark. Me? Marin said. Her voice sounded distant in her own ears. Ida laughed once, delighted. You heard the man, she said. Teacher just cleaned you out, Silas North. The room's tension snapped into sound whistles. Low laughs, someone pounding the bar. Silas surged to his feet, chair screeching. That pot was between me and Creed, he snapped. She'd already lost. No money, no right to sit. You put her in it, Ida shot back. With your own mouth. The deputy stepped forward from his shadowed corner, coffee forgotten. I heard you put her job in there, he said. Heard you promise your say with the board as part of the stakes. Whole room did. Heads bobbed. No one looked away. Silas's eyes cut to Marin, hard and bright. You don't even know what to do with it, he said. Land, notes, votes. These are tools, not storybook endings. You'll blade on every edge. Marin's hands still shook, but she folded them together to hide it. I handle sharp things every day, she said. Children's minds, folks' pride. Chalk seems harmless until you write the wrong thing with it. A few men smiled at that, quick and wary. Rowan pushed his chair back and stood, slow and deliberate. His height and width shifted the air. You lost, North, he said. You bet a teacher as work and another man as land, thinking the house would carry you. It didn't. Don't drag more people under trying to pretend otherwise. Silas looked between them, calculating, searching for a seam. The deputy tapped the butt of his gun lightly, not threat, reminder. "You back out now," he said, "and every man here knows you for a cheat. Not the kind who palms a card. The kind who bets people and crawls away from the bill." Silas's jaw flexed. Reputation was the last fence he cared about. "Fine," he said finally. "Let the teacher be queen of scraps and paper." He yanked a folded note from his coat, the bank's script clear at the top, and slapped it down. "Creed Ranch note," he bit out. "Capital and interest, all tidy." Another paper followed, edges greased by handling. "And your precious influence," he sneered. "Letter from the board making me their quiet fourth vote." He shoved it toward Marin. The papers slid until they rested against her straight flush. "There," he said. "You've got the world in your lap. Don't choke on it." He grabbed his hat off the floor, turned, and shouldered through the crowd. No one clapped him on the back this time. The saloon door thudded shut behind him. Silence rushed in. Marin stared at the two papers, ink and signatures. Lives wound around both. "You don't have to take them," Rowan said quietly. "Yes," she said, "I do. That's what winning means. You pick up what the loser dropped." Her fingers closed on the note first. "Miss Calloway," the deputy said cautiously, as if she might suddenly decide to set the place on fire with a match and a notion. "That's the deed to Creed's debt." She unfolded it. Eyes running over the lines she and Rowan had struggled through in the schoolyard when he brought Eli to enroll. Numbers, interest, due dates. All the ways a man could be slowly eaten by ink. Marin folded the paper in half. Rowan flinched almost imperceptibly. "Wait," he said. She met his gaze. He looked almost like he had at the table, steady, ready to lose what mattered if it bought someone else a little ground. "I won it so no one else could hold it over you," she said. "Not to replace Silas with another jailer." She tore the note in two. Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. She tore it again, and again, until the words were nothing but confetti on green felt. "Debt's cleared," she said simply. "Far as this town's concerned, Creed Ranch stands on its own legs." Rowan stared at the little pieces. His jaw worked. His eyes shone with something she did not dare name. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes," she said. "I did. I've spent enough time in rooms where men bind other people with paper. I'm not going to become one." Ida's grin was wet at the edges. "That's one way to revise the town ledgers," she said. "Page 1. We stop selling each other." Marin picked up the second document. Chairman Lyle's hand crawled across the bottom, his loops and flourishes trying to look official. The text was simple enough. Silas North to be consulted on all major school affairs. Quiet power, given without a vote. The deputy watched her. "That one might be worth keeping," he said. "Proof the board forgot who they serve." Marin folded it carefully and slipped it into the inner pocket of her jacket. The parchment warmed against her ribs. "Lanterns are more use than bonfires," she said. "I'll shine this where it needs shining." "Board won't like that," Ida murmured. "Board hasn't sat under a leaking roof," Marin replied. Rowan's gaze moved through her pocket to her face. "What now?" he asked. Now, she thought, I stop begging. "Tomorrow," she said, "I walk into that boardroom and remind them their job is children, not creditors." Ida straightened. "I believe I'll just happen to be in the next chair then," she said. "Wouldn't want them to forget anyone's listening." The dealer, still a little pale, scraped the card scraps into his hands. "Never seen a hand like that," he muttered. Marin looked down at her little river of hearts. "Me neither," she said, "but I'm not counting on another one. Time to build with something sturdier than luck." Rowan smiled, a quick, crooked thing that tugged at his scar. "You just ended a debt with paper," he said. "That's more than luck." "No," she said. "That's a choice." She stepped back from the table, legs shaky, and headed for the door. The crowd parted around her, not like she was fragile, but like they were making room for something important that needed to pass. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at Rowan. "Don't disappear into the hills yet," she said. "I'm going to need lumber." His eyes warmed. "You'll have it," he said. "And men who know how to make it stand up." Ida caught up to Marin at the hitching rail. "I'll walk with you," she said. "Half the town's about to develop urgent business on that hill. Best make sure none of them tries to sell you congratulations on credit." Marin almost laughed. Almost. The night wind hit her face, cool and clean. For a moment, she let herself feel the weight of what she'd done. She had just tied her life, and her students, to choices she couldn't yet see the edges of. But when she pictured the schoolhouse roof, sagging and stained, fear shifted into something else. Resolve. The back room of the general store smelled of flour and stale coffee. The school board used it for meetings because it was free and close to the biscuit jar. Marin stood at the end of the table with her grade book closed and the folded letter on top of it. Her hands wanted to tremble. She pinned them to the leather spine. Chairman Lyle cleared his throat as if that gave him more authority. Mr. Pierce, freight owner, shuffled papers he didn't need. Reverend Alton smoothed his beard. "Miss Calloway," Lyle began, "this isn't your scheduled review." "The roof couldn't wait until spring," she said. "So I didn't either." Pierce frowned. "As we told you, there are no funds." "You told me that while looking over my head at Silas North," she said. Their faces tightened. Lyle blinked rapidly. "Mr. North is a respected." She set the board's letter in the middle of the table and opened it. "Respected enough that you signed this," she said. The room's air changed when they saw their own ink. Pierce paled. Reverend Alton's mouth compressed into a line. "That's private," Lyle said weakly. "It stopped being private when Mr. North bet it in the Dead Lantern last night," Marin said. "In front of half your voters." Alton looked up sharply. "Explain." So she did. Not the color. Not the humiliation of losing her last coin, or the sharp joy of seeing Silas' face when the straight flush hit. Just the facts. Silas wagering his unofficial vote, Creed's note on the ranch, her own employment, the public stakes. Ida, seated against the wall like a judge and jury combined, nodded at each point. "I saw it," she said. So did the deputy. So did a dozen men who'll talk if asked. Lyle's face shone with sweat. "That was a private understanding," he protested. "We never ceded our duty." "You ceded the appearance," Marin said calmly. "Every time I came with a request, you looked to him. Every time I said children, you heard cost and waited for his nod." She tapped the letter. "This says my job, and the roof over little heads were tied to a man's gambling house." Pierce shifted, shame and worry warring on his face. "If this gets around—" "It already has," Ida said. The room was full. Reverend Alton folded his hands. "Miss Calloway," he said slowly, "what do you want?" She met his gaze. First, a motion entered into the minutes today, rescinding any special voice given to Silas North in school matters. Second, a statement posted outside the schoolhouse door, in your own handwriting, that the board answers to the town's families and their children, not any private creditor. And third, he asked, she inhaled, approval for immediate roof repair. Lumber and some labor donated by Creed Ranch. Freight charges forgiven by the Pierce line. She looked at Pierce. Considerate investment in your future freight clerk's ability to count. Ida hid a smile. Pierce stared at her, then at the letter. "You're asking us to walk away from a man whose money keeps certain holes covered," he said. "I'm asking you to look your congregation in the eye on Sunday," she countered, glancing at Alton, "and be able to say you didn't trade their children's safety for a line of credit." Silence stretched. Then the Reverend sighed. "Rip up that letter, Lyle," he said. Lyle stared. "What?" "You heard her," Alton said quietly. "We've been lazy, letting a gambler shoulder responsibility for choices God gave us." He turned to Marin. You have my vote. On all 3 points. Pierce rubbed his jaw. If Creed's donating the lumber. He thought of wagons, invoices, names on ledgers. Fine. I'll waive freight to town and back. Put it in the minutes that it's a donation. 3 pairs of eyes turned to Lyle. He sagged in his chair. If I say no, I look like a man who sells children's heads for a free whiskey, he muttered. You'd be accurate, Ida said. He glared, then dropped his gaze to the letter bearing Silas's name. Motion carries, he said at last. Unanimous. Alton crossed to the stove, struck a match, and held the letter over the flame. For a heartbeat, Marin thought he might hand it to her, but he let it fall into the stove instead. Ink blackened, curled, and vanished. Symbolism matters, he said. Marin wondered if Silas would count the loss of that letter, if he'd feel it like a missing coin, a missing tooth. Now, Pierce said briskly, perhaps to flee his own discomfort, about that roof. The next days smelled of fresh-cut pine and sweat. Creed wagons rolled into town loaded with rough boards. Rowan's men unloaded them with easy strength, boots thudding on packed earth. After lessons, older boys begged for hammers. Girls asked to measure and mark. If you can read a ruler, you can drive a nail, Marin told them. Go wash up, and don't you dare hit your thumbs. Eli Creed ran back and forth between his uncle and the sawhorses, a boy-sized shuttle-stitching ranch to school. Uncle Rowan says this beam's sound is a sermon, he announced one afternoon. Says if it falls, he'll eat his hat. Then he'd best set it straight, Marin answered, eyeing Rowan on the ladder. Rowan met her gaze and tipped 2 fingers off his brim. Sawdust clung to his shirt, his forearms, the dark hair at his temples. He looked more comfortable up there, hands on wood, than he ever had in the saloon. On the 3rd day, Silas rode past. He didn't stop at first, just slowed his horse on the road, watching beams rise like ribs over the schoolhouse. Marin saw him from the porch and stepped down to the gate. Afternoon, Mr. North, she called. He turned his head. His smile was back in place, but something behind it had gone brittle. Quite the barn raising, he said. Didn't know the board had such deep pockets after all. The board remembered who it serves, she replied. Turns out that stretches pockets nicely. His gaze flicked over the men. The boys, Ida passing up a water bucket, Rowan bracing the new frame. Creed's throwing his weight around, Silas said. Be careful, Miss Calloway. Men who move lumber for free often expect payment in something else. Marin kept her voice flat. He paid his debt when I tore up that note, she said. Everything since his choice. You're familiar with the difference. A few men paused in their work, listening with their eyes. Silas's jaw tightened. You destroyed wealth that could have done this town good in the right hands, he said. You used it to threaten those same hands, she answered. If that's your idea of good, we were due a change. He leaned in his saddle, studying her as if looking for a crack. You made yourself a target, he said quietly. Men remember who costs them money. Children remember who kept them dry, she said. I'm betting they grow up to matter more. Behind her, Rowan called down. Miss Calloway, need your eyes on this joint. She didn't look away from Silas. Excuse me, she said. I'm busy building something. His gaze raked over her one last time, then shifted to Rowan. The look there promised future moves, future games. He tugged his reins. Enjoy the first storm, he said. Not all of them are so gentle. He rode off in a swirl of dust. Rowan climbed down and joined her at the fence. You keep talking to him that way, he said mildly. One of these days he'll bite. He already did, she said. I just learned how to pull the teeth. He studied her profile for a moment. Next time, he said, don't forget you've got someone to swing a stick to. She glanced up at him. You think I can't fight my own battles? I think you shouldn't have to fight all of them alone, he answered. Something warm settled in her chest. It felt alarmingly like relief. The first storm came 5 days later. Clouds stacked over the hills, dark and urgent. The children watched them through the windows more than they watched their sums. "Eyes on your slates," Marin said, though she kept one ear tuned to the sky. Thunder rolled. Then the rain came big, heavy drops that slapped the roof hard enough to be heard whispered spelling. Every head tipped back, eyes going to the ceiling. Marin looked too. No dark streaks bled along the beams. No water fattened the old cracks. At the far corner, a single drop swelled, slid into a bucket one of Rowan's men had insisted on leaving just in case, and disappeared with a soft plink. Nothing else followed. Eli grinned so wide his cheeks bunched. "She's holding," he whispered. "She is," Marin said. The room exhaled together. Shoulders eased. Pencils returned to paper. For the first time in months, she taught during a storm without calculating which desk to move when the ceiling gave way. At the end of the day, after the last child had trailed home through wet streets, she stayed behind, chalking tomorrow's date on the board. "Seems to work," a voice said from the doorway. She turned. Rowan stood there, hat in his hands, damp where the rain had touched him. "Eli reported every drop," he said, with more excitement than a man ought to have over a dry floor. "Dry floors are underrated," she replied. He walked to the middle of the room and laid his palm against the new beam. "Feels solid," he said, "like it intends to stay." "We could all use that feeling," she said. He glanced at her, then at the row of small desks. "Board give you trouble?" he asked. "Less than they gave that letter," she said. "Reverend Alton burned it himself." Pierce agreed to the freight. Lyle tried to wriggle until he realized wriggling looks a lot like guilt when everyone is watching. "Good," Rowan said simply. She hesitated. "I wanted to ask," she said. "When I tore up your note, did it feel like I pulled your father up by the roots?" He was quiet for a long moment. "My father believed land was everything," Rowan said slowly. "But he also believed men were worth more than what they worked. He took that damn note on himself so his hands could keep eating. I've been carrying his fear and his pride both, like they were the same animal." He looked at the beam again. "When you ripped it, it felt like blasphemy," he admitted, and like relief. "Like you cut a rope. I been holding so long, I forgot how to unclench my fists." She let that sit between them. "I didn't ask," she said. "I made that choice for you. You made it for Eli," he said. "For the men who work my range. For your students. For kids who'll never know how close their world came to being carved up because of one piece of paper." He looked back at her. "If I have to wrestle my ghosts because of that, I'll do it." Her eyes stung. "Partners in wrestling, then," she said. A half-smile tugged at his scar. "Partners," he agreed. Something eased inside her at the word. All her life men had tried to put her on pedestals or in corners. Partner was new. Partner was level ground. He shifted his hat between his hands. "Silas isn't done," he said. "You know that." "Yes," she said. "But he's not the only one who knows how to play a long game." "That so?" Rowan asked. She nodded. "I've got his habits on paper in my pocket. I've got a board that just remembered it has a spine. I've got 24 children watching what adults choose to do." Her smile was small and fierce. "He's not the only one laying tracks in this town." Rowan's gaze softened. "You sound more dangerous than he does," he said. "I hope so," she replied. "His danger is quiet poison. Mine is lesson plans." He chuckled, low and genuine. "Remind me never to cross your curriculum." She tilted her head. "I thought you were already enrolled," he sobered, still smiling. "Best class I ever signed up for?" he said. They stood there in the quiet, two figures under a new roof, the ghost of rain still whispering outside. "Rowan," she said. "Mum? If he comes at you another way, papers, bad bargains, talking in men's ears, I hope you will come tell me before you decide to raise everything again." He nodded once. "And if he comes at you in some room I'm not in," he said, "I hope you'll remember you don't have to stand there alone." Her throat thickened. "I will," she said. He set his hat back on. "Eli's waiting down the hill," he said. "Wants to show me a sentence he wrote without help. Been bragging since breakfast. Tell him I expect correct punctuation," she said. "He says commas are fancy tales," Rowan said, amused. "We're working on it." He moved to the door, then paused. "Marin?" She startled again at the sound of her name in his voice. "Yes? You did more than win a hand last night," he said. "You changed which way this town leans when the wind hits." She thought of torn paper, raised beams, children craning their necks at the first storm. "I had help," she said. "Get used to it," he replied. "Partners, remember?" He tipped his hat and stepped out into the fading light. Marin sat at her desk and opened her lesson book. On a clean page, she wrote 3 words for tomorrow's list: shelter, debt, courage. Her pencil hovered, then added a 4th, choice. At the bottom margin, small but firm, she added one more word she was still learning how to trust: hope. Outside, the last drops of rain slid harmlessly off the new roof. Inside, the room smelled of chalk, fresh wood, and possibility. She closed the book. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.